welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. My name is Jessica. I am your host, and I am here today with an author. You're in Italy, right?
Yes, I'm in Milan.
Yes, and you wrote a book that takes place in Italy. It is atmospheric. It is beautiful. It is frightening. Please introduce yourself and tell us about this book.
Of course, my name is Yiğit Turhan, and I'm the author of THEIR MONSTROUS HEARTS. It's actually my debut novel in English, but also my second novel, because the first one I had published in Turkey in 2015. It's a novel about a young writer who finds out that he just received a mysterious butterfly collection from his estranged grandmother after her death. And he's a struggling author, so he decides that he's going to take this train ticket back to Milan and find out what the villa hides. It's a story about survival, it's a story about obsession, but for me, most of all, it's a story about immortality and what we would do in order to get it.
So I have to laugh a little bit because, first of all, I always say this every now, I shouldn't say always, but I frequently say this on the podcast that I am definitely a person who judges books by their covers. And there's a whole industry that goes into making books look like something you want to pick up. And I love it. And I appreciate that a lot of this has kind of turned them back into art, and yours is gorgeous. It is so pretty. I saw a preview of it and what it was going to look like, and I was like, I've got to get my hands on this book. But one of the other reasons was the butterfly imagery and the monarch butterfly imagery. So a little background, when I was a kid, I had a few reoccurring dreams, and one of them was about a library, but we're not going to talk about that one. And they were scary dreams, and I'm a librarian, so figure that. But the other one I had was about a monarch butterfly. And what the dream was that my mother and I were shopping at our local mall, and there was a pet store there, and we'd always go into this pet store, and there was a giant monarch butterfly that sucked your youth away. I know the face that he's making right now, because this is not a visual podcast. Yeah, so I saw the cover of your book. And I saw what it was about, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to get in there and talk to him about this book, and I need to read it. So yeah, that was my dream. I was really young. It's one of the dreams that really sticks with me. I mean, again, because reoccurring dreams don't happen much. But this one I had a few times, and I remember it was always like I'd get to the point where we were about to go to the pet store, and I'm like, no, it's going to be there. It's going to be there. And it was there. And suddenly my mother was old, and I knew it was coming for me, and I'd be older. So that was another reason why I was like, must get my hands on this book. This book is awesome. It has so much in it. And it is a gothic story, and it has a male protagonist, which is not something you see very often, even though there is a secondary protagonist, one can say, because you get her accounts from the past, and that's that is Ricardo's grandmother, who left this decaying villa to him. But I'm really, really curious where all of this came from, where, you wrote a story about a writer, you wrote a story about his grandmother, Parahan, is that how you pronounce her name?
Yes.
Yes. I did read a very short interview with you where you said that you had a grandmother who was also this larger than life figure. But I want to know just how all of this and the butterflies came together.
So I think it's like bits and pieces, because when I start working on whether short stories or like novel ideas, I have a lot of ideas, but then I try to stick with the one that sticks the most so that I keep thinking about. When I started thinking about a short story. I had this idea about the butterflies, and it started right before the pandemic. I wrote a short story, and that was like how this novel started, even though that scene is no longer in this book. The scene was about this library in Paris where a beautiful girl takes Ricardo, so Ricardo was there, takes Ricardo to go to this library together. And at a certain point, she's like, would you like to smoke? And they go out on the terrace and she starts smoking and says, wait 1 second, I need to do one thing. Goes into this very small crevice between two walls and lights up with the lighter. And there are a lot of blue morpho butterflies. She takes one of them and says, oh, it's a pity, they don't want her anymore. And boom, she burns the butterfly. And he doesn't understand what just happened. So this was basically the first idea where it all started from, because I was thinking about butterflies, how they are preserved after their death in these beautiful domes, especially in a store that I really like in Paris. I saw like hundreds of these domes on different shelves. And I said, what would it be like if the butterflies hit something a little bit more sinister? Also, because they are universally accepted. I work in fashion, and I have seen, I think, butterfly prints more than I have seen anything else. But I've never seen, for example, a cockroach print or like a spider print. It's much more rarer than the butterfly. But at the end of the day, they are all insects. There's something about the butterfly that does not intimidate the people, and on the contrary, it kind of welcomes you in because it's so beautiful to look at, but doesn't mean that it is not necessarily evil in itself. So I wanted to use this concept as a symbol where I could hide evil, because today I feel like it's not that easy to spot where the evil can come from in our daily lives. That was one thing. The second one was, I was raised by my mom and my grandmother, but my grandmother was the closest person to me ever. We spent like a lot of times together. We had so many memories. And then she had Alzheimer, and in her last years, she didn't even know who she was, and she thought she was my mother. She changed the color of her hair, etc. So slowly, when I thought that we would have had even more fun together, because I was a young adult and I had my own life in Milan and she would come visit me, I saw that regardless of her life energy, she was losing her identity. And I felt like it's such a pity that we are inside these decaying vessels, since the time of our birth. And especially for an immigrant, it's so hard because you spend your whole life trying to find who you are, what kind of place you belong into. You work on yourself. Finally, you arrive to a point where you are happy with everything, more or less, but you find out your time is up because the body that you are in is just failing you. So I started thinking about these two things. I lost my grandmother in the meantime, and then the pandemic hit, and I was learning how to do butterfly domes, looking at YouTube videos. I looked like the Dexter with dead butterflies like on my kitchen table, because I don't know how to cook. I started thinking about a parallel world, because I was in the pandemic by myself. I was stuck in the house, especially in Italy, like we were completely locked in. I said, what would happen if my grandmother was still alive? At least in my mind, we had this parallel world where we could meet again and go through this whole mystery. So I felt like I needed a male character like Ricardo, so I could look at my grandmother from a outside point of view, like an external point of view. And at the same time, I really wanted to write the story about my grandmother and Perihan. Like, for me, if there's a main character, even though it starts with Ricardo, it really is Perihan, and the protagonist of this is Perihan, for how I see it. So for me, I just built this spider web where there is Perihan waiting for the tiny fly to just come and jump on the spider web. And then we are unfortunately looking at what happens to this poor little fly, and we know how that is going to end.
Amazing. And the book is amazing. And that was probably a better description than I could have even hoped for. The book, it just has so much beautiful language and imagery, and it is trapped behind a thick glass of foreboding. It has like this claustrophobic feeling, almost like it almost made me think when he gets there and he's at the villa and he's interacting with all of these people who knew Perihan, and then also he finds Perihan's journal and starts to learn about her life. like it gave me almost like a Rosemary's Baby feel. What were some of your, I guess, literary and cinematic inspirations for this particular novel? Because it is a very cinematic book. Like I felt from the opening scene, which is so wild. I felt like I was sitting in my film theory class having my professor tell me about this amazing film that everybody should know about. So yeah, I'm curious about just your journey to that.
First of all, I love this comment. Thank you for that. Because when I write, I really write thinking about it on a big screen and not necessarily in a book. So if I had one wish, probably it would be to see this as a movie. I had a lot of different actresses in mind. So when you look at someone like Perihan, even though the concept comes from some of the things that I learned from my grandmother and some of the imaginary things that I added on this character to make it into someone different, I was really thinking about like real life people. So I was thinking about this socialite that I'm obsessed with, Lynn Wyatt from Dallas, and like she's very opulent and blonde hair, etc. I was thinking about Catherine O'Hara between Beetlejuice and Schitt's Creek, someone like fun and doesn't like always very fashion. Or I was thinking about Jean Smart from Hacks. So all of these women with their opulence, but at the same time they're very smart, they're very intelligent, etc. For me was kind of how I built Perihan. So it already started from a world of actresses in means of the inspiration. Then in means of the scenes, I wanted to create a cinematic experience, because how I see it as I write it, I see different scenes, and it's really important for me to give you the scene so that you can pick who your Jean Smart or Catherine O'Hara is going to be. And it's also very interesting because when my friends started reading it, I was like, who would play Ricardo in this film? Who would play? So it's really interesting to see what they see when you are using words to give a creative brief to the reader, but then you are not actually picking the visual references that they see when they are alone with your book. That's what I find very fascinating with the books. And when it comes to the claustrophobia, I love a lot of the horror films, but I have some favorites that I go back to. It's Rosemary's Baby, it's Hereditary, it's Babadook. It's a book that I love is House of Leaves, because it's a claustrophobic experience. You know, you don't know what you're gonna get and you get lost in its labyrinths. So I wanted to create something like this. I get a lot of comments about the fact that it's a slow burn, it's a gothic tale, but then there's something that builds up and suddenly at the end there's an explosion. I actually wanted it to be kind of a slow burn because I like the privilege that I have with someone who wants to give me their time, and I can just get them into the story slowly versus just shocking them scene after scene with action. At least that's how I like to be entertained when I read the books. The thing about claustrophobia is that when I was a kid, my favorite game was hide and seek. I have a sister who is a year younger. I call her Gizmo. Her name is Gizem. And with Gizmo, we would play hide and seek all the time. And one thing that I learned, I was really good at this game. One thing I learned, if you know the real rule of this game, you will always win. Just try to hide in plain sight. Nobody is going to look for you because they will always think like the most crazy place that you would hide, but never in front of their eyes. So I said, okay, I have this grandmother, I have the butterfly collection. Let's bring Ricardo back home and put everything in front of his eyes. But because I'm hiding everything in front of him, he's never gonna know.
It makes me think of a favorite movie of mine, and this is one of my favorite things that authors do, where they do hide things in plain sight. The movie itself, it's not really a horror movie, but the line in it, I'm trying to remember. The movie is called Lucky Number 11. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's it's from the early aughts, I think, mid like 2007-ish. I have to look it up, but it's really cool in the way, and I'm totally spoiling this for somebody who hasn't seen the movie, but it's still worth watching, by the way. Where basically the idea is, nobody's going to suspect the guy who doesn't want to be there. So, like when you watch a lot of these movies and you get that twist, that Kaiser Soze twist, or that, like it's always the person who you're just like, why, like, oh God, this poor guy, like, what's he even doing here? He doesn't even belong here. Like, are like, it's, and you're thinking about everything but the person in plain sight who is very visibly supposed to be an accessory but is not. And then you're just like, oh. And I got that very much from what you were talking about, because you know something's going on. You know something's not right. Like Ricardo, he's having his issues and he gets this villa, but it's falling apart. And you think it's going to be a million other things because you know you're going into, a horror suspense book, and you're already trying to stitch everything together. But there's like, again, like it's just this tapestry that you kind of have to like look back, stand far enough back to be like, yeah, okay. I missed everything and I caught everything.
Try to just get out. If you can just get out, you know. You made me think of also like the movie, like it's in plain sight, but then you have to watch the whole thing to understand like it was there in front of your eyes. Or The Sixth Sense.
Yes, yes, yes. The Sixth Sense. Actually, Soap was the one with
Feels when he's the should we ruin it for people who haven't seen it? Should
yeah,
I
no,
tell them?
the only reason I'm actually saying that is because there is a name drop of Syosset, New York in Soap, so everybody from Syosset knows that movie. And that's part of the whole, let's not spoil it for anybody. But yeah, no, I think like everybody in Syosset gets really excited when people mention Syosset because we're the only Syosset in the world. But yes, anyway, let's not spoil that for anybody. I already kind of spoiled Lucky Number 11, but you should still watch it. Um, yeah, and you also mentioned House of Leaves, which by the way, I'm sure you know this if you're a House of Leaves fan, but there is a soundtrack to that book by the author's sister. And even if the book is not your jam, the soundtrack is fabulous. I listen to it all the time. Haunted by Poe, I think is the name of the album. But you talk about House of Leaves, which has certain qualities that their Monstrous Hearts have, which, the journal, I did get just this amazing, almost like cosmic horror, eldritch horror feel from it. Um, I want just your opinion on why books that have that and have somebody discovering a journal are so compelling, both to readers and writers, because I mean, I know as a reader what I love about it, but as a writer, how does that, like, how do you feel about just how that fits in?
Actually, this is a great question. There's something, at least for me, very interesting about secrets, because I'm very interested in understanding what the secrets people are interested about, but what they want to keep a secret as well. When you look at, for example, the story of Perihan, which starts as a very poor Turkish girl, from a very traditional, very religious family, and like then she builds her whole life, and finally she finds out, she recreates herself in such a way that if the old Perihan would see the new Perihan, probably they wouldn't even believe that they are actually the same person. I love this idea of, I've always been actually quite obsessed with this idea of parallel universes, and also lives that we can just live in this life, because I don't know if I will come back and I will, reincarnate or anything, but if I can find different things for Yeet myself to do in this life, and I am like, I have a day job in a fashion company, that's a completely different thing. Then I write these horror novels that is unexpected, because usually like if you meet me like at a dinner or something, probably you would think that I write rom-coms, like, because like I'm very like joyful and I talk about like fun things, etc., but really I'm obsessed. I only watch horror films, which my friends also complain about. That when it comes to cosmic horror, I don't know, like I can talk about it from the point of view of Perian and Ricardo. I wanted to write a horror book that was about immigration. Because I found that when I was in Turkey and then I came to Milan, I had to create my life from scratch because I had to learn a new language. I was an engineer and I wanted to work in a creative industry. So I started working in fashion, but it was not an easy way, entering into a different industry. So when I looked at this from an immigrant's point of view, stability is a privilege, but at the same time, in a world so volatile, it's very interesting. Legacy, for example, is very interesting to me. Having values and having a family, having long-lasting relationships, having that willingness to live forever because you are having so much fun out of this one life that you have. You just don't care if you are 90 years old and maybe some of your organs are failing you, etc. You still have that willingness. And that's what my grandparents had. That's what my parents have. And that's what I would like to have one day. So I hid all of these secrets. But at the end of the day, Perihan's real secret was that she was so in love with life. Ricardo was the perfect person to kind of fraud. I don't want to give away the ending because he's so lazy and he doesn't take his own life in his hands like most of Perihan's friends does. Because one question I had in the middle of the book, I was like, should I change the ending and maybe pick one of Perihan's closest friends because she knows them, she knows their ways, she can just imitate them better, etc. And then I said, no, Perihan is quite angry about the fact that there is this very healthy young boy who can do anything in life. He would still live like a struggling author and like try to come up with the first page because he's afraid of a white page, which I also have, the writer's block. I have it constantly, but I try to overcome it and I force myself to write and I force myself to start because once you start, the rest will come.
This was amazing. Your book is amazing. It's beautiful, both inside and out. And thank you for perpetuating my distrust of butterflies. I've gotten over it, but when I was really young, I remember a monarch butterfly like flew into my hair and I flipped out and everybody's like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I can't explain it. You're gonna think I'm weirder than you already do."
I love this story. The butterfly not you. It's amazing imagery.
All right. Well, I'm gonna leave it on that note. This was amazing. Check out Their Monstrous Hearts. I cannot wait to see what you have coming next. I'm sure you have something up your sleeve. I would ask you about it, but I'm going to say let's meet again next time.
It will be my pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay, we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.